everyone, and welcome to another sponsored product demo here at Risky Business. My name's Patrick Gray. The idea behind these sponsored demos is that a vendor, a founder, gets to come along and show you all what they've built, you know, what it is, what it does, etc., onwards and onwards. And today we're going to be having a look at Dropzone. Dropzone is an AI product that essentially is designed to do the work of a tier 1 SOC analyst. And that's the really boring, low-level stuff that even the people doing that work don't really want to do, right? So the idea here is not for those people to lose their jobs. The idea here is that they can start doing higher value work, and in fact even learn a lot from this product due to the way it structures its reasoning and whatnot. So joining me now is the chief executive and founder of Dropzone, Edward Wu. Edward has an interesting story actually, because prior to this he worked for Extra Hop Networks. And he was the first person to join ExtraHop to build out the security functionality of that product. It's a fine product, but yeah, this is something different. This is really using large language models and AI-based sort of reasoning to go through a lot of those steps of investigating alerts in the SOC, you know, pulling data from a bunch of places and then trying to make determinations as to whether or not something needs to be escalated for further review. Edward, thank you for joining me. How did I go there with the explanation of the product? Do you think that's about right?
Yeah, that was perfect.
Okay, excellent. So onwards to the demo. You know, what are you going to start off with? What are you going to start off showing us?
Yeah, so I'm going to start off by showing our dashboard. And this is kind of the default landing page of our web app. Our product itself is a SaaS, so it sits in the cloud and then integrates with our customers' existing security stack by using APIs. So our product generally deploys within 30 minutes, where all it takes are API keys, read-only service account credentials, and then once it's connected with your existing SIEM or EDR or cloud workload accounts, our technology can be configured to pull alerts from specific systems, and then it will essentially start autonomously investigating any alerts that come into the system.
Yeah, now that could be something as simple. It's been a while since I've seen it, but you know, the last time you and I sat down and walked through all of this, you showed me an investigation of like a log4j alert, right? Which most of the time, like a lot of the time, that's going to turn out to be nothing. But in the instance you showed me, it's like, well, there's been this log4j alert, but then Dropzone can go and query other systems and say, oh, look, a new jar file loaded on that system very shortly after that log4j alert fired. You know, this is probably something that needs investigation. Then you can query the network stack and onwards and onwards. So that's the basic thinking here. But yeah, so you've got your dashboard here. This is the default view that someone's gonna look at, and I imagine those events are just sort of scrolling by on the right, and that's where the action is.
Correct. Yeah. So in this case, you can see for this particular deployment demo instance, we connected our system to Microsoft Sentinel, as well as the Microsoft Defender suite. And as part of, in the last 30 days, our technology processed 7 alerts, and our technology reached different conclusions on the variety of like true positives as well as false positives alerts that we simulated in this lab. Below here, you can see a high-level visualization of the MTTR response metrics. So if I click into it, you can see as our technology is processing those alerts, on average, we are reaching the conclusion, like reaching a definitive conclusion within 10 minutes. Out of that, on average, 1.1 minutes are actually spent within the SIEM or detection tool itself. And then immediately within 1 second of the alert being generated, our technology picked that up and kicked off an investigation. And then, yeah, in general, it was able to finish the investigation within a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, why don't we look at a couple of these events that have been flagged and sort of determinations made. You know, let's look at one that was a false positive. Obviously, we're not talking about a false positive from your product. We're talking about a false positive, you know, bubbling through in the SIEM that Dropzone has analyzed and said this is nothing. And then let's look at one of the ones where it's like, okay, this is definitely malicious.
Yeah, so one example here is an email got flagged by Microsoft Defender for Office 365 as potentially phishing email. And this is a case where our technology investigated this particular phishing email report, but concluded the email was actually benign and was about a kind of a marketing outreach. And this is where for every alert our technology investigates, we include a high-level summary of the alert. That is kind of the input. We also show a list of what we call top findings, as well as a short summary on exactly what we found that caused us to reach a specific conclusion. In this case, the conclusion is benign. And this is where I'm sure a lot of the analysts will be looking at this and be wondering, hey, like, did this large language model or AI agent just hallucinate? How do I actually double check its work or see more details of the reasoning process? So this is where our technology, as it's looking at a specific alert, it is going through different aspects of the alert and digging into different artifacts, as well as following different investigative threads. So for example, for this email, our technology unsurprisingly checked if there are like any attachments or inline files, but then it also looked into, for example, who received this email, like what does the language as well as the sender in the email kind of indicate. After that, our system looked into, for example, different links within the email. And while it's doing that, it's using a combination of both threat intelligence feeds as well as actually following the links using a built-in headless browser within our system. So we are actually using large language models to visually inspect every single landing page, as well as the text or the DOM tree of the landing page to ensure both visually as well as kind of from a JavaScript execution point of view, the landing page is actually benign.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it at the intro, but one of the things I really like about Dropzone is you can stick a junior in front of it, and they're very going to quickly realize, what sort of things you should be checking for in circumstances like this, because none of this is rocket science, right? There are all these simple steps that give you the context to be able to make a determination. And that's also not to say that this is going to be right every time, but at least it's laying out the reasoning, laying out the steps. It's almost like having someone sit in front of a console being driven by someone who's got a bit of experience, right? So it's it's fantastic for upskilling juniors.
Yeah, absolutely. In a lot of cases, one analogy I generally use is it's kind of like using radar cruise control when you are driving on freeway. Obviously, we are not autonomous driving where you can completely the whole SOC.
Yeah, you can't take your hands off the wheel and read a book, right? But it's pretty good. Yeah, I know it's a good metaphor.
Yeah, so our technology, in addition to inspecting different elements of the alert and asking a lot of different questions and pivoting across different threat intelligence tools, in this case, as well as when we get into some of the more IT and corporate alerts, our technology will also make SIM queries to pull in additional relevant metadata. And every piece of information our technology captures during the process are recorded within what we call an evidence locker. So the analyst can see exactly what kind of analysis our technology looked at for example, different IOCs, as well as down the road, for example, which SIM queries our system also generated.
All right, well, why don't you show us one that's not benign?
Yeah, so let me show you kind of an interesting investigation. So this one talks about a new user being added by API. It's kind of a classic behavioral detection rule because new users sometimes could just be new employees or new members of the IT team. But at the same time, that's also a great way for attackers to achieve persistence, is by creating essentially users for themselves, so that even if the infection or the initial breach is cleaned up, they still have this user credential in the Active Directory environment that they can use to get back into the system.
Well, yeah, and interestingly enough, like an alert like this that kicks out of a SIEM, the thing that's going to determine whether or not it's suspicious or benign is just going to be context, right? It's just going to be going out there and collecting context around that user creation event that's going to let you see whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing. And again, none of that is rocket science, right? Which is why an AI agent can actually do it. But I'm getting ahead of you. Go, show us.
Yeah, so in this case, obviously we saw Emily Eaton, a user, creating another user using API. So if I go to the findings tab, you can see our system trying to understand, like, when was the user created, who created this user, at what time. Do we know anything about Emily Eaton? Like, in this case, it seems Emily Eaton is actually the VP of IT, which might explain, like, legitimate reasons for Emily to create a new user. And then our system also looked into, okay, is this new user being created? What do we know about it? For example, in this case, you can see our technology reaching out to the Microsoft Security Graph APIs to pull in information from the Azure Active Directory or Entra ID. And then our technology also looked into, is this behavior common for Emily? Like, is this the first time or the 500th time Emily has created a user? Obviously, this kind of information is not available within the alert itself. And this is where our technology generated a programmatically generated a MS Sentinel query that identifies the number of times the new user creation activity has been performed. As you could see in the past 2 months. So again, everything our technology is doing, it's not, like you said, rocket science. We are using software to automate steps that any human analyst would have done anyways themselves. But instead of having them tapping between windows, we are automating them using APIs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that query, though, like, that's something that's going to be beyond the capabilities of a junior, right? To be able to actually write a query looking for that, that's starting to get a bit fiddly. It's still not rocket science, but it's, that's like, there's not many people who are actually going to bother to do that, right? Because structuring, figuring out the syntax, just doing a query like that takes time and knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. This is where, all of us who have spent enough time in SOC knows these queries look easy to write, but most of the time when we write it, we don't get it right the first time, right? We will be like, start with a couple conditions, and then we might get no data, and then we start second guessing ourselves. Okay, did I make a mistake in this query, or there's actually no activity? So most of the time, it actually takes a lot of energy and effort, even if you already know the query language, to craft the correct query.
Yes.
And it's
going to be different.
Right.
You're going to be writing a different sort of query based on the event type as well. So having them like automatically generated by LLM is, very nice. And this is the thing. I'm so glad we're doing this demo, because I think it's very easy for people to be skeptical of like LLM based tools. And I think there are a lot of people sort of creating security tools and stuff with LLMs where, the use cases are pretty simple and the demo is like very limited in use case. You know what I mean? Like, it reminds me of the old Your Boy Serge jokes from tech demos. And yeah, this one, it's cool. Anyway, sorry, I'm sidetracking you.
No, it's good. Yeah. I think this is where, unfortunately, most security products nowadays have their own custom query language. And what we have seen is it's actually quite difficult for anybody to be a master of all of those different query languages, because they all have different syntax. I think we have like CQL, SQL, right? KQL. We have like, feel like we are going to run out of alphabets very soon.
No, I know, man. And it's like, I've had so many vendors who I've dealt with who excitedly announce the release of their new scripting language for their product. And I just think, really? Like, another one? Is that what we really want? But, if you've got LLMs that understand the scripting language, then these scripting languages actually become quite useful. I think they're more useful to large language model agents than they are to actual human beings, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Like in this case, for example, if I toggle to the evidence locker, you can see in order to perform this particular investigation, our technology generated actually 3 different queries, like 2 against the audit log and then 1 against the signing logs. And then in addition to that, we also kind of pivoted across Entra ID or Azure Active Directory as well. And again, this is where it will probably have taken a junior security analyst anywhere between probably 10 to 30 minutes to perform this kind of analysis, assuming if they know the query language. And with our technology, it's all kind of automated. And what's even more interesting is in this case, our system identified this as VP of IT, not the first time this VP of IT creating a new user account, but also it's not the 500th time, right? So this investigation is kind of interesting where, like, based on the information we can find from the SIM, it's as well as Entra ID, it's a little bit in the air, right? You can see an attacker maybe doing it, or possibly VP of IT just stepped in and created a new service account or user for like a new contractor. And this is where a lot of the times there are alerts that even with like the technical SIM analysis could still end up being somewhere in the middle or in the gray zone. Fortunately, in this case, our technology also looked at relevant activities that occurred associated with this particular user at the time. And what we have identified is there has been an external email that was sent to this user, Emily Eaton. And then actually on Emily Eaton's workstation, we have identified this malicious attachment being executed, as well as the exploit being detected that involves this attachment. So here, this is where our AI agent not only is focused on this specific alert, but also pulled on the strings a little bit and correlated additional context that are based on other alerts as well as investigations that has occurred recently. At the end of the day, we reached a kind of a conclusion that the user creation by the VP of IT itself appears to be authorized, but we have seen recent alerts that reveal VP of IT's device being interacted with malicious files from this external sender, and this particular malicious file was linked to this Adobe Flash vulnerability. So this is where, with these additional context, our technology is flagging this particular alert as very suspicious and require further analysis.
Yeah, and I mean, it would require a phone call to the VP of Tech, Emily, there. I'd imagine that would be the likely outcome of this, and just asking them, hey, did you do this? But I'm guessing also that those alerts around malicious files, being executed, they would have popped up in a separate incident, right?
Yep.
And we can look at that in the console?
Yes. Yeah, so you can see here, this is where we saw the separate investigations or alerts. For example, this email alert flagging Emily Eaton receiving this malicious attachment. And you can see here, if I toggle to the findings tab, our technology look at this malicious attachment. We leveraged both sandboxes as well as, for example, Falcon's threat intelligence feeds to correlate that. And if I toggle to the evidence locker again, even for this particular email analysis, you can see our technology like pivoting across different feeds to look at this particular file hash of the attachment. We also looked into this external URL that seems to be hosting this malicious file as well.
Now, I'm guessing just with the way this is set up, just with Sentinel, I mean, you're not going to be looking, in this demo at least, at many sort of other alert types, like, from network sensors or whatever?
Yeah, so for this particular demo, we are currently focused on like phishing as well as endpoint and identity-based alerts. But we have pre-trained our technology on 6 categories of the most common alert types. So at this moment, our technology already supports, in addition to identity, phishing, and endpoint alerts, it also support network alerts, cloud workload alerts, and SaaS alerts like Office 365, or for example, you might have some alerts associated with like GitHub or third-party SaaS applications.
Yeah, right.
There's one other feature I want to show. As we are building our AI security analyst, we have to really deconstruct what makes a human security analyst effective and efficient. And as part of that process, what we have identified is that the technical analysis, such as looking at the virus total behavior report of a file hash, or knowing how to query, write SPL queries to interact with SIMs, or the technical expertise to navigate the maze of AWS control plane UI to figure out like who actually created this Kubernetes pod. Like all of these technical analysis, from what we have seen, are only responsible for around 60% of the actual efficacy of an expert human security analyst. The other 40% actually comes from the institutional knowledge that they accumulate in their head as they stay and work in an organization. Traditionally, security products have always been quite difficult to deploy because it's hard to teach your EDR that, hey, this tool is expected, or this behavior is expected, or hey, our IT team built a tool that they use for remote management, even though the PowerShell scripts they wrote really resembles some sort of backdoor or C2 channel. And this is where we have built a capability, what we call context memory. It's kind of like a knowledge base that our AI SOC analyst keeps and maintains. And within this knowledge base, it will contain organizational policies, preferences, and practices. And our technology, as our system is investigating different alerts, it will utilize different bits of context from this context memory. And there are a couple of different ways the context memory could be built. The easiest way is during deployment, if our customer is giving us access, for example, to their existing case management system. We actually, during deployment and within the first hour, will kick off an automated kind of study process to look at every single ticket or case within the case management system that might contain historical triaged alerts, and then automatically infer different nuggets of context about the organization. So that's kind of one way where it's very similar to how a new hire might be asked to review the investigations or the alerts that the team has triaged within the last months as part of the onboarding process. But obviously with software can look at 1,000 tickets just within a couple of minutes, which is very helpful to speed up the onboarding process. In addition to that, our product is also continuously generating and inferring context as the users are using our technology. For example, in this case, we have an initially suspicious alert. You can see our technology initially marked it as suspicious, but then the user came in and overwrote this conclusion, saying, hold on a second, this activity is actually benign because of this user is expected to log in from this part of the world. And given this piece of information, you can see the Dropzone automatically creating new entries within the context memory that talks about, hey, this user is allowed to log in from Iceland. So moving forward, any unusual logging activity associated with this particular user will be augmented with that extra piece of context.
Well, you need that, right? Like SOC analysts need to be able to remember that sort of context so that when those alerts just keep bubbling up and bubbling up and bubbling up, they can just, normally it's them just remembering and swiping them away, which again is why I have described, tier one work as pretty tedious. Because often that's what it looks like, right? So if you've got a system that can just say, no, this is fine, then it just goes away. Then no one has to deal with it.
Yeah, and this feature has also been very, very exciting for some of our MSSP customers as well. Because one challenge a lot of the MSSP providers have is in order to reach scale, they have to have a single analyst work across multiple clients, right? But the challenge as their single analyst working across multiple clients brings is that it's very difficult for that single individual, regardless if they are offshore or working in high cost of living regions, to memorize everything.
Yeah, they got to memorize like a different context for every customer, and that's just not how the human mind works, right? I guess is
exactly
what you're getting at. Yeah. So, I mean, you've been going for about 2 years now, which is interesting because you were very early to this. At the time that you founded the company, like I think there was maybe one other doing something like this. It's been really funny over the last 6 months watching just like this like mad rush of people starting companies doing similar stuff. But as sort of oddly enough, even though you're a 2-year-old company, you're kind of the incumbent in this space. Who's most interested in the tech? I mean, you're at the point where you've got plenty of sales, you've got plenty of customers. Like, is this just like anyone who has a SOC is going for this, or are there particular customers for whom this is particularly relevant?
Yeah, good question. We do think in the fullness of time, our technology will benefit from will benefit everybody who have essentially a security operations center. But at this moment, a couple, you can say, use cases we have seen being most interesting. First and foremost, getting help, like small SOCs, getting help to achieve or up level to 24/7 coverage has been a very common thread across many of our early adopters and customers.
So when they come into work in the morning, they've got a bunch of investigated cases, they can just work through them.
Exactly. And then like during weekends as well as evenings, they connect our technology to essentially their Slack or pager system. So when and if our technology, for example, in this case, finds multiple confirmed malicious alerts, we will essentially page them. Because
man, I didn't think of that. That's a great idea, right? Like that makes a lot of sense, which is to actually plumb it in. So there's someone on call where if this thing starts throwing a bunch of red alerts, you kind of know you've got a real problem at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Because historically, the other, like in addition to using a service provider, the other only way to get to 24/7 and weekend coverage is making sure you at least hire 5 people in your SOC across like 3 different continents. And obviously both the cost as well as the managerial headaches is not trivial, given like in order to get this around the clock coverage, you do need people working from different continents.
You and I talk a lot, and that's I'm guessing that wasn't one of the initial use cases you would expect to be most popular, but as soon as you said it, I mean it makes complete sense, right?
Yeah. And then like a couple additional use cases we have seen a lot of interest. One is organizations where they started off using external security service providers, but as they continue to scale and grow, they have kind of outgrown these service providers and are looking to bring like alert investigations and the SOC in-house. So when they are trying to essentially up level and move off of service providers, our technology has also been demonstrated to be a great component of that migration. Because a lot of these organizations, they want to keep a lean team, a lean but elite team, and rather than, for example, go hire like 10 additional junior security analysts to help look at different alerts, they can hire a fewer number or smaller number of junior analysts, but and augment those folks as well as their existing lean and elite team with our technology.
Yeah. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And, you know, tier one SOC work is sort of cruel and unusual punishment. So I don't know that we should
Yeah.
want more people doing that. And I'd imagine too that those tier ones who come in, I mean, you've been around probably long enough now to see the effect that using this actually has on the tier one people. Do they tend to, you know, graduate into higher level roles pretty quickly when they're using this?
Yeah, absolutely. We have definitely seen a, you can say much faster graduation rate or up level rate. Because historically, tier one alert investigation is right off the passage, right? It reminds me a little bit of the maybe the middle age like guild or apprentice model, where you kind of have to be an apprentice for 3 years before you are allowed to maybe take on larger projects. I think most people can become quite good at alert investigations way before the 2 or 3 year mark. And with our technology, the necessity of them staying tier one and doing the grind work when they already have the expertise is no longer there anymore. So they can be immediately up leveled to take on more challenging, whether it's threat hunting, whether it's IR. Some of them are spending more time actually building detections now, because by being a tier one analyst is a great way to train detection engineers, because now which detection rules are not very good and which ones truly move the needle.
All right, well, Edward, we're going to wrap it up there, mate. But look, thank you very much for joining us. I should have said so at the intro as well, but I'm an advisor to Dropzone. So Edward and I, we chat pretty regularly, and it's always good to check in and then to look at the product, which, on the surface of it, it really is the sort of thing that people would be skeptical of. I think because LLMs, like if you just publish, if you just do a Google search these days, you always get an AI generated block of text that makes no sense back in your query, right? So, those general models don't look that shiny, at least to me. But, when you're using them to do applied stuff like this, it is actually very impressive. So thanks a lot for walking through a demo. Again, for me, a refresh demo and one for the listeners and viewers. Always appreciate it, mate. Cheers.
Thank you.